Welcome back. Earlier, we defined psychology as the scientific study of behavior and mental processes. So I wanted to take a few minutes to talk about what it means to think like a psychologist, think like a scientist, and why we might even go to the trouble. So first, why would we go to the trouble? It seems like intuition and common sense serve us well in a lot of cases. The concern, though, is that sometimes those two methods of decision making, of information gathering, are flawed. In addition to general limitations, we can note two specific phenomena: hindsight bias and overconfidence. Definitely take a few minutes to read about those in the chapter in the textbook. Sometimes they are just frighteningly familiar. So the alternative is what we call the scientific attitude, where we explore, we doubt. We don't just take it at face value and say, oh, okay. We say, oh, I'm not so sure about that. We ask questions. Have you thought about this? What about that? At the same time, though, we're humble because we're recognizing we don't know everything. We're just trying to figure out what all we don't know. So to do that, we ask and answer questions using what we call the scientific method. Scientific method includes three important components. One is the theory, or the story we're telling about things, about our variables of interest, or about people's behavior. Based on that story, we make predictions. In other words, we write hypotheses. Then we go collect data to figure out if that prediction is accurate. I'm actually having you skip the section of the chapter in the text that talks in detail about the different methods of data collection. But please do note that when we talk about collecting data or researching in this context, we're not just talking about reading things we find at the library or on the internet. We're talking about specifically observing people or otherwise gathering information about their behavior and their mental processes. One result of that information collection can be understanding of what we call a correlation. A correlation is when a change in one trait or behavior accompanies a change in another. We can have what we call perfect positive correlations, or just generally positive correlations, where an increase in one behavior is accompanied by an increase in another. We might not have any relationship, it's like just no relationship, or we can have a negative correlation, where a decrease in behavior is accompanied by an increase in another behavior. So it may be as exercise goes up, weight goes down, but as negative correlation, but as calorie consumption goes up, weight goes up, a positive correlation. So why do I pause to talk about something as specific as correlations? They're pretty basic ideas, and you might have actually heard about them in other classes, if not your memory from your general psychology class. But the thing I want to emphasize is correlation does not mean causation. So there may be some things we see portrayed in the movies, but there's a lot of things in day-to-day life that if you start to look at it, you realize that's not really the way it works. And there are a couple other dynamics that we're more likely to see portrayed in the movies that relate to this idea. And the two main themes here are illusory correlations and random events. Illusory correlations are perceptions of a relationship where a relationship doesn't actually exist. So we just really feel like as this goes up, the more times I play the lottery, the more likely I am to win. So the more times I play, the more money I'll gain from it. But it doesn't work that way. The other concern is just random events. We look for order and meaningful patterns, but the data, it may just be completely random. There may not be any pattern that dictates the next number that's going to come up or the next thing that's going to happen. If we think that there is a correlation, if we think that there is order, it might obviously affect our behavior. We see that play out in a number of cases, and we'll see that demonstrated in a number of movies. So, what do I want you to take away from this segment? I want you to have a basic idea of what research entails. I want you to make sure you're familiar with this concept of correlation and when it isn't an issue or when it isn't a good guiding post for behavior. And I want you to keep in mind why we care, those hindsight biases and things of that sort. So until later, thanks for listening.